Good evening, folks. I am now starting a new series here. I'm going to be doing a lot more uploads the next couple of weeks. I just had to take some time off here to get some affairs in order. I know that it's Christmas time, so hopefully you'll just check it out just because you're bored at your house or whatever it is. I don't really know. But I'm talking about my favorite films. I was going to start off with one. Again, when I talk about favorites, I'm not talking about like this is like a top 10 of my favorite films. These are just films that I like for various reasons, and I will explain them. They may not even be in the top 500 films of all time. I don't know. I don't know. Like, for instance, the one I'm talking about today, By the Sea, I have no idea where that's at. If I were to give it a guess, I'd say it's in the 300 to 400 range, but it could be further up. I don't know. It depends. Because a lot of what favorites are is it doesn't matter that it's good to who? This guy right here. Well, at least my favorites. I don't know about yours, um, but these are the reason I like them is because I just enjoy them for a variety of reasons. So let's get to it, so to speak. All right. So when we're talking about By the Sea, this was Angelina Jolie's. I don't think it was her last film. I think she's made one recently as well. Mhm. Almond milk kills what today's pain is. So, when we're talking about, so to speak, favorite films, there's a couple of reasons that I consider it to be one of my favorites. And I suppose, for lack of a better term, I don't even know. I couldn't even give you a guess on how many films are my favorite because it depends on what you classify. Do I think it's good or is it one of my favorites? If you mean by one of my favorites, then I probably only have about 100 films or so that are my absolute favorites. But this is one of them. And the reason is because it is so beautiful. The whole film is beautiful. It is done by a female director, which, when done properly, those films are extremely, extremely good because they deal with interpersonal relationships usually. Because usually when females make films, they're not so much about saving a galaxy as much as they are about saving your family or saving who you love or saving something like that. It's much more interpersonal when females direct, and I think this is a perfect example of a great interpersonal relationship. Now, we all know the story. I'm sure that we've heard that Brad Pitt and her divorce and blah blah blah. Who gives a shit about that? I'm not worried about that. I don't give a backstory fuck about the particular backstory to this. I'm talking about the pure and honest film that came from this. Okay, and this is, I would argue, one of the most brave films I've ever seen a female make. I don't know about males. I don't know what you would consider brave in males. I mean, obviously, stories of going across battlefields and blah blah blah. That's one thing. I get it, but especially if they took part in it. Like, I understand that's brave, but it's brave to say I am complex and I am not perfect. And this film, she definitely said that. I am complex. I am not perfect. And I can't explain to you like what an honest and refreshing change of pace that is from what Hollywood puts out most of the time. Because what Hollywood puts out most of the time is Captain America is a good person. You should like him. Iron Man is a good person. You should like him. Thor, well, blah, blah, blah. But like Thanos is a bad person and you should not like him. Okay, and this is why we oftentimes get kickback in film with people saying, "Well, Thanos, he had some good ideas." It's like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, if you think that destroying half the galaxy randomly is a good idea, then okay, then we're probably at a disagreement. But anyway, um, but with this film, what you see is her idea of how she enjoys life. I'm talking about Angelina Jolie. I'm sure this was written with her playing that character in mind. Obviously, it's a '70s type film, which is also one of my favorites. I mean, anybody that knows me knows that I like '70s clothing and music. There is no doubt about it. There's not much about the '70s I don't like. So, just to let you know, if you want to get on my good side, just point out all the great '70s films. It's not hard for me, or especially music, because I do like the rock and roll of that time. I especially like disco, and I like soul music from that time too. So she starts off with that. I would believe it's set in the 70s, although it's never really clear when it's actually set, which is fine. It doesn't matter, but because it's totally irrelevant to the story. It's not like it's 70s, but they're in France, and it's her and Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is a writer, and Angelina Jolie is his wife. I assume that she's probably, although it never really goes much into the backstory, I assume that she's rich, and this is why they're able to do these things, because it doesn't seem like he really holds down a job or has much going for him other than trying to write a book. And you get into more and more complex behavior as time goes on. She develops a fetish with watching the young couple in the room next to her fuck. I mean, to be completely frank, she does, and it kind of envelops her, and she gets obsessed with it. And it's a very Hitchcockian thing, just to point out, which Hitchcock is one of my favorite directors. I really wish Jolie would make more films like this, even though it did not do well on the box office. And I understand that they're probably not lining up to make more films like this for her. But it's because people, although the audience is more complex than a lot of filmmakers give them credit for, they're not that complex. They're not this type of story complex, which is a little sad. But that's okay. I mean, again, this was made for 10% of the audience. Again, if you're making an art house film, you're making it for 10% of the audience. It's just that not even that 10% got behind it too, which was a great tragedy with this film because it was really that good. She and you can tell that this was going on probably during her divorce, or I don't know if I think they were getting married at this time, or maybe they were married. I don't know, but you can tell that she's starting to think about like what is the process of this relationship at this point in time, because I think they had been married for something like 30 years. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But you can see as she's breaking it down that she's trying to make herself the victim in this particular story, that she's the bad person, she's the salacious person, that although he has problems, it's caused by her, which is absolutely false. I get that is, but for her to be able to say that anyway about herself is, I mean, that's like looking at a mirror and saying, maybe I could use a little makeup. That's hard. I'm sure I've never been a woman. I never plan on being a woman, but I can tell you that I'm sure that that's not very easy for someone to be that honest with themselves. And although I don't know, I've always been under the assumption myself that it takes two to tango, and regardless of your problems in a relationship, the other person has just as many. So I would always, and usually the person that's pointing out that they have problems is oftentimes the one that's not the problem, if that makes sense. So I'd like to also point that out for the record. That usually if you're like, hey, I'm not perfect, but we're working it out. Usually it's not you that's the problem. It's a person that's like, and they're all right. It's like, oh, okay, you mean your wife of 10 years? Okay, I'm sure she's all right. But anyway, back to the story. So she, like she said, and I don't think I'm giving any spoilers because I would have hoped that you had seen this movie by now. If you did, maybe this will spur you to watch it. So I'll keep the spoilers down to a minimum. But as she becomes more and more obsessed with this couple, I think it's because she's reminiscing the early days of the relationship that she had with this writer. Because again, you don't know if she's talking about herself or the character. That's almost impossible to tell. But they struggle throughout the entire film to kind of identify where their relationship is at this point. And ultimately, it leads to success because he ends up finishing his book. She pushes him enough to where he finishes his book, which is good. I think that we all won there. But there's a couple of other reasons why I like this film, not just because of that. No. There's more. One, and I have said this, I don't even know how many times, so I don't need to say it again, but I hate French film. It's like if you take, Okay, let me just put it to you in a food analogy, the difference between French film, American film, and, well, really, we can even go one step with even articulating Asian film. Okay, all right, American steak, potatoes, maybe a vegetable, maybe you got a salad, but it's all there and it's delicious. Okay, French film, um, it's like this really artsy fartsy meal on like this plate that's like it's like a half crescent moon, and they're like, "Ooh, try this. This comes from some place that you don't know, and it's exotic and it's interesting." All right, maybe some of it is good. Okay, maybe some of those foods are good. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you that there are not good French film. There is. There's tons of good French film. I don't personally like them because of World War II, but that's a different story altogether. But but their film, I hate when people say you should like this film, and if you don't, you're not smart. I hate that. That is one of my least favorite selling things for film. Like when Oscars come out and people say, "Oh, well, this is about blah blah blah, and it's so important, and you need to watch it." Why? Why don't you just tell me the story, and if I like the story, then I'll watch it? Does that make sense? I'll go watch the film, but it doesn't mean I have to like it just because of X, Y, and Z. All right. So that's kind of like how the French present, and then the Asian, it's like a whatever. Like they have kung fu film, but they also have really good art house films too. So they're the best of both worlds. They've got it all. Um, but especially like the Chungking Express. I don't know if you've ever seen, and I'll be talking about that one in one of my favorite films too. The Chungking Express is fantastic. If you've not seen that film, you should be ashamed of yourself. Well, maybe not ashamed, but you definitely should think about your life decisions and the fact that they are not good. Um, the thing is that she took a French concept, and it was even, I don't know if it's on the Riviera. Excuse me, I've never been to France. Um, um, but uh, it could have been on the Riviera. I don't know. The one thing I can tell you though is that she took a French style film and she actually made it palatable. Like how, like for an American like me who's used to cheeseburgers and steaks all the time, you know, yeah, I definitely dug it. Like it was super good. And that's like the exact opposite of what I should like. But she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna throw a little Hitchcock in here, a little bizarre behavior, a little bit of obsession, some nudity. That's all stuff I like. You found my heart. You found my heart. And on top of that, um, it's just a powerful story about two people because there's not really anybody besides maybe a bartender and a handful of other people. It's not a large cast at all. It's mostly a meditation on relationships, which is cool. It's just a totally awesome film. Now, is it for everyone? No, I understand that. It's not for a lot of people. It's bizarre. It's good filmmaking. It's storytelling through two people. Um, it's not for everyone. Like if you think that the only films that you can go see are they have explosions in them, you will be heavily disappointed in this film. This film is not going to live up. There are no explosions in this, except for explosions of the heart. And I think we can all get behind that. But again, as I said before, like why if you like storytelling about people, which is a lost art for sure, if you like golden age of Hollywood type stuff, but with maybe a little like more new wave twist with some different elements being thrown into it, yeah, then this is for you. And if you don't, then you just go back to watching your Transformers '85, Decepticons Revenge, and that's cool. And don't get me wrong, I like those films too. I love to see things blow up. Okay, I like that stuff. Okay, Point Break, which is another one of my favorite movies that we'll be talking about. There are There's so much to love about good storytelling, and it doesn't have to come in a formula. Okay, you don't have to have X amount of explosions and X amount of chases to make a good story. And this is what pisses me off, because this is the only gripe I have with audiences. And I don't have many gripes with audiences. I really don't. So this is the only one I have. It's that when there is a good film that comes out, I would say 50% of the time it is missed by the audiences if it doesn't have like explosions or an exciting factor to it, right? Like the reason that Joker wasn't missed is because we know who the Joker is and we wanted to see that film. And that was an excellent film. It's hard to watch, but it was an excellent film. Okay. But there are good stories that happen at least 4 or 5 times a year that go completely under the radar because they don't have like that brand name with them to get audiences and to come see them. You know, Mud or the one with Nicolas Cage. What was the name of that one? Where he was, it was kind of a similar story to Mud. It was a coming of age story. Like there are so many good films that come out and people just skip right by them. And that makes me mad because the whole idea is not that this is on film and that you should like it. It's that it's a great story. And great stories are universal. They should be, at least, to a large degree. They should tell something about ourselves and about society and about the world that really makes things interesting. Or at least a new twist, or an idea that's really good that needs to be fleshed out more. There's all kinds of ways to tell good stories. And this happens to be one of them. And maybe it's because I like bizarre cinema, like obsessionary cinema, like that, like Hitchcock and stuff like that. Like maybe that's just why. Maybe that's why I like it, and as opposed to you who sits here and doesn't like it, and it's just like, I even went out and watched the film. It was total crap. Okay, well then we're at a disagreement. That's just human. That's human to disagree about things, and that's cool. But I can tell you that, and I told you at the beginning of this, if you like interpersonal stories on film, this is a masterpiece of that. It just is. There's no other way to describe it. It's a masterpiece of interpersonal storytelling and small scale storytelling, which I wish Hollywood did more of. And now we are at almost 18 minutes. I have talked about this enough. Until then, auf Wiedersehen.